one of our first panels of the 12 Hours Ask Congress. Very cool that you're here. My name is Melanie Stein. I'm a journalist for ARD and Gruner and Jahr. And now you might get the impression that this will be a very international panel, since we will talk English. But I have to confess, we're not only German, we're all from Hamburg. So now it's really up to you. So who is not from Hamburg? Please raise your hand. Oh, one person. Applause for this person, please. And who does not understand German? Come on, you could at least pretend. Okay, well, who likes listening to English panels? Yay! Yay! So let's do it in the Berlin style. We continue in English and talk a bit about AI. The Professor Toby Walsh, he said in the year 2062, machines will be as smart as human beings. And I think this is quite an interesting future scenario. Some of us will maybe experience it. But today, we do not want to talk about future scenarios, but talk about the impact which has AI on society and economics already. So now I introduce to you our panelists, then we have a little bit of a discussion, and then I'm very curious about your questions. And our first speaker is the Chief Technology Officer of IBM Services. He studied computer software engineering in Hamburg, and he works in very large transformational projects. So he unites IT and business. Please welcome Thorsten. Well, who of you knows what AI, what artificial intelligence actually is? Please raise your hand. Oh, only a few. I thought we all have kind of an idea on AI, but maybe you can tell us a little bit more. What is the difference between AI and the common algorithm?
Yeah, so
change those for a moment. So traditional algorithms, the stuff I studied is about understanding the requirements, doing a lot of programming. So actually humans typing in, programming a machine. AI, in contrast, is a technology that enables a machine to learn from data. So it's all about patterns, pattern recognition, and acting on those learnings.
Okay, cool. Now we all have an idea. Please have a seat.
Thank you.
That you're here, Thorsten. And our next panelist is a researcher at the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft. She studied psychology here in Hamburg and in Stellenbosch, and in the last months she was working on a study together with Google and Verdi, looking for the jobs we will need in the future. So please welcome Roda Mueller-Wieland. So Roda, is there something which really impressed you during this research, or like a really new insight you got from this?
Well, is it on already? Yeah. Well, I was intrigued that there are a lot of studies about automation of jobs, and there's a lot of panic about it, that we're losing a lot of jobs because of AI, for example. But in the end, if you get a bit more deeply into it, it's not really sure if it's going to happen, because it's not really precise on the different sectors the jobs are in. So you really have to check for the tasks that you have in each profile, and then think of if actually a technology is also going to be implemented, and that depends on cultural and organizational issues, and also the social acceptance. So in certain sectors, chatbots, for example, are not really accepted from the client, so maybe it's actually not going to change so quickly as everyone thinks.
All right, cool. So we'll talk about this later a bit more. Take a seat.
Thank you.
Thank that you're here. Applause for Roda. And most of you will know the next panelist. He's the CEO and director of the Hamburg Institute of International Economics, and also a professor for economics here at the Hamburg School of Business Administration. Please welcome Henning Voepel. you're one of the creators of Hamburg-Wieland digital campus. What role does AI play there?
This one? Okay. A crucial role. The idea of Hamburg-Wieland Digital Campus is to bring together all people being engaged and dealing with transformation and new technologies, how to use, how to deploy, especially artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence will probably and most likely change the way we organize the whole economy, right? How we structure firms and companies, how we work together, how we organize in general the whole economy, and that will be very different from the industrial way to organize the economy. So that's why my impression is that AI will completely change the way we live, the way we work, and we organize the economy.
Okay, cool. So, and how these changes look like, we talk about in a couple of minutes. Take a seat.
Thanks.
And but first, we introduce our last speaker. He is a specialist for IT law, and he has written books like The Law of Computer Games. He's also a lecturer at Hamburg Media School, for instance. So please welcome Rauda. So Christian, you advise big tech companies. Will this be the case in a couple of years, or will it be the robot who gives the advice?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Obviously, also in the legal field, we work with AI, and some tasks can be automated, and some things will probably, robots will probably take part of our work. But there is still enough left for us, for the specialists actually, because robots will only do general and lower research and recognition of certain classes, but we'll probably still need lawyers in the future.
Okay, that's good. You stay with us. Come here. And applause also for Christian, please. So, great that you're here. Henning, you have talked a little bit already how AI will change the economics. So how do you see the changes? What will happen?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to distinguish different types of artificial intelligence. We can distinguish the weak or so-called narrow type of artificial intelligence, focusing on improving processes and well-defined products and services. That is very different from the other understanding or idea of artificial intelligence, and that is trying to mimic human behavior, right? So consciousness, and to replace human intelligence by artificial or machine intelligence. So it depends on what we are talking about, and so that refers what you said in the beginning. It will first have a huge impact on the labor market, and also on the way how we educate people, right? So that is the first task, I think, also for politicians and for the society, to decide how do we want to use artificial intelligence, and that pretty much has to do with data. So we cannot separate the usage of artificial intelligence from the usage of data. So we have, that's my impression, to find a way how to preserve privacy of people. What kind of data do we want to use, processed by artificial intelligence? Maybe you've heard of the idea that everybody must be aware of whether we talk to an algorithm or artificial intelligence or to a real person. And so we have many questions, ethical, regulatory questions to resolve, and but in any way, artificial intelligence will become a paradigm for the future.
Mm-hmm. So, Roda, you focused a bit on new ethics. Do we need new ethics for questions like this?
Well, I'm not sure if they necessarily new. It's fine because ethics was for a long time not really important, or I think a lot of people who are philosophers were not so prominent, and suddenly they are the most important people talking about technology in our future. So I don't think that it's necessarily new, but we just have to think about what is the desirable future, what kind of futures can we create, and which one do we choose, you know? So the earlier you think about ethical implications, the earlier you can react and use potentials, you know what I mean? So I think the dilemmas are still the same. You just have to think, how can we apply the principles into practice? Because right now they're only ethical principles, but no one really knows how to apply them.
So how could we apply them? Christian, do you have an idea? As a lawyer.
Yeah, no, I'm here for the law, not for the ethics. I'm from the dark side. Well, obviously we still have, or already have rules, and we will apply the rules to artificial intelligence as well, and to data. I think this is one very important aspect. Henning mentioned the raw material is data. So the question is, who is the owner of such data? How is the individual protected with personal data? How can we make this an informed choice about what kind of data do I share with others? And we have regulations about that. Everybody heard about the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, which Datenschutzgrundverordnung, yeah, great word, which came into place last year, and this actually raised the bar for privacy and data protection in Europe. So we still have already have a very strong protection, but the problem is actually to apply it and to enforce it, because a lot of people, a lot of companies, they don't care. They just go forward, they do what they do, and it is very, very difficult to find some middle ground, because a lot of people, they just don't know what's going on with AI, and it's very difficult to explain it to them. For example, look at these cookie banners you have everywhere. You say, well, I accept cookies. Well, what are cookies? And sometimes there's some, look at more detail, and you open this, and there is just some text, and nobody really understands it. So how can we inform the individual in order to get informed consent? It's very, very difficult. We have to bridge this information gap. And I have actually no clue at this moment how we can deal with that, but this will be a real challenge for us.
Do you think, do you think we should
Take a microphone.
do you think we should simplify this procedure? I mean, just to agree on A, B, or C, because everybody knows the situation when we are at the airport, for example, and want to send an email or to check the emails, and we agree on everything, right? Without having read the things. So don't we need to simplify the procedure? Is there any opportunity to do that?
Well, there is one approach when you try to classify things. For example, when we remain with the cookie example, you say, well, I accept the cookie like for marketing purposes, or for purposes of using a more convenient access to the website because I'm already logged in or something like that. So you can group, but still, if you say, well, I agree for marketing, does that mean I actually consent to the data being given out just to anybody? No, we have to make this distinction, because you have to know where your data actually goes to. And if we do this, we just break it down, and everything gets atomized, and we're back at the original problem. So on the one hand, we want to inform people. On the other hand, being informed is just so complicated. Everybody hits the button, I agree, because we can't read it. Otherwise, we'd lose hours and days of our life.
Yeah, I fully agree to that. So I would think that I pretty much understand what's happening, but it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort to read.
And I know a lot of people who just click the largest, most colorful button without even thinking. And if you start thinking, yes, you have to read. It's like if you rent a car somewhere in Mallorca or so, whoever reads the full contract before signing a contract? You do? Yeah, and it's an attitude. It's really an attitude thing to make this practical. But it's also an attitude towards the ownership of the own data. And little tip here, you can always change your mind and delete what has been stored. So even after the fact you have clicked, you have options to choose from.
So what's the view of IBM on this problem?
Yeah, so the view of IBM is the data the data is owned by the customer. So in contrast to some other companies...
Do you believe this?
Yeah, this is another thing. This is another thing. So the first thing is, and this is always a question you should ask yourself, what is the business model of the company you are dealing with? So the IBM business model is the data is owned by the customer, and our customer is typically enterprises. So, for example, if you take the sponsors here, so Hasbar is a customer, or the local hospital, UK Eppendorf is a customer, or other are customers. And the IBM policy is the data is owned by the customer, not by IBM. So we do not make money out of that. On the contrast, and this is a general statement, if you use any site on the internet that has some value to you, because you can do appointments or have a social network and you do not pay for this, somebody has to. At the end, somebody has to pay, and it can be somebody who can do advertisement can pay for this, and if it's anonymous advertisement, that may be fine. But if you consent to that somebody collects all the data, it has more value for the people collecting the data, and it's always a question. So the question is always, what is the business model behind such services?
Mm-hmm. So, Christian, does the general data protection law actually protect us enough when you look at Google or Facebook working with our data?
Yes, I think we have to make a distinction between two kinds of data we're talking about. One is personal identifiable data. This is any data which somehow is linked to a person. So it's not only your name, your email address, but it's a photo, it's the information where you have been at a certain point in time, basically anything, your hobbies, whatever, the internet sites you surfed at. And there is other data, which is machine data, which has no link to any person. So we have to make this distinction. The General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, only deals with personal data. So because they say nobody needs to be protected if there is no link to a specific person. So if anything is anonymous, or if I don't talk about a specific person but about a group, for example, the information, today there are 620 people at the 12 Hours US conference. This is an information, a data piece. There is no personal data because it does not say who was at the conference. However, on the other hand, if somebody attended this conference, this is a personal identifiable data. And the GDPR only looks after personal identifiable data. And I think this new data protection law is actually quite powerful and actually protects us because it says that there is no data processing without any legal basis. So in normal life, everything is legal unless it's illegal. In data protection law, everything is illegal per se unless you have a specific legal base to do it. So it's basically the other way around. So you need some legal basis, which can be consent of the person, which can be like you have a contract and you want to fulfill this contract, or you have, for example, legitimate interests. So I think if we really take the GDPR seriously, there is quite some powerful protection.
But that's a question, right? Does Facebook, does Google take it seriously?
Obviously they don't, because otherwise they wouldn't be imposed fines. So they face serious fines. The GDPR has draconic fines and penalties in there. So the maximum fine is 20 million euro, or 4% of the worldwide revenue of your group. We're not talking about profits, we're talking about revenue. So this is actually a very powerful weapon, and even the big companies now need to take this privacy issue seriously, and they do. They're more compliant than they were, but there's still testing the waters and obviously are non-compliant in several ways, and it's very, very difficult going after these US companies from a European perspective, obviously. But we see that there is a tendency to, maybe you also heard Mark Zuckerberg has said, well, GDPR is a great regulation. Now they want to like change it. It's not a bug, it's a feature. Yeah, it's great for us. So they say we comply, our data is safe. I don't really believe that they're doing their homework 100%, but it actually got better.
Okay. Roda, in the beginning, I said that you were working on a new study. It's not published yet, so you get some really interesting insights. So what are the main findings, and how was the cooperation with Google and Verdi?
Well, maybe the background of the study is that they, Google, Verdi, and IHK, München and Düsseldorf, they decided in the beginning of this year to build like an education offensive or an education initiative with the goal to look how the jobs are changing in 4 special areas, which was logistics, trade or commerce, and insurances. And so what we did was actually analyzing all the literature that is there, that is existing. We didn't produce our own data. And we tried to find out how are the profiles going to change, and how are actually the employees already being educated right now, so that we can see where's the qualification gap. Because there is a lot of knowledge about that. We need a lot of data scientists, for example, in future, or IT specialists and so on. And the question is, are the companies aware of it, and are they already having some training programs to create this change, to develop their employees to become this really asked workforce? And I can say that the insurances are not doing too bad, so they are really impacted by the technologies. So a lot of tasks can be overtaken by AI, for example. So it's going to change a lot, but they are also really active in providing employees the special education programs to develop. While in the logistics, the people are rather using technologies to relieve the physical stress. So it's not that they are substituted, it's more that they are supported, and actually they can work a bit longer then, and it's for their own health. And in e-commerce, it's interesting because, of course, some things are going to be substituted. On the other hand, most of the companies have a really conservative cultural mindset still. And the client, as I said, they are not accepting chatbots. So the change is probably not going to be implemented so quickly. So they still have the chance to improve their educational program, because the educational program has to focus more on competences that I need in the digital world. And that's not completely different competences, it's more that the competences we know now in the analog world, like collaboration, communication, interaction, and so on, we also need to apply this in the digital world, and that's a bit different than analog, as we know. But that's the competence framework for the future, beside the very specialist technologists.
Mm-hmm. And what were the findings on the lower qualified jobs?
Well, yeah, they're highly likely to be substituted. And that's the point. For example, in logistics, there are a lot of people who are not so qualified in doing simple tasks, and not so many high qualified people. So what are you going to do with all the not highly qualified people? You can't make them to data scientists within a few weeks. So you have to think right now, what is our future plan, and how can we try to have a strategy where we don't lose so much personnel, and be also able to compete globally. And it's especially clerks are affected by AI and other technologies.
Mm-hmm. So Henning, what could be the future plan then? A very easy answer question.
Good question. So throughout the history, we have seen that we as a society are able to create new jobs, and we have to adjust, of course. And I think it's not only low qualified people, low skilled people that are going to replace, but also increasingly cognitive and non-routine jobs and tasks are replaced by algorithms or artificial intelligence. So we should, referring to education and qualification, we should rather teach skills and tasks than educating people for jobs, right? Because in the future we are likely to be flexible and to be able to adjust to new jobs, to new tasks. So it's about combination, and to my view, we will have many jobs dealing with overlapping constellations of humans and artificial intelligence. So we cannot separate one from the other, and that's, I think, the task for the society to invent, to reinvent our education system, to be prepared for the disruption.
We are waiting for this for so
the labor
long.
Market, right?
Yeah,
But I'm convinced that we will be able to create new jobs. They will be different, of course, but that has been the case for decades and centuries, right? So I'm not that pessimistic that what some studies say that 50% of the workforce, labor force, will be replaced by artificial intelligence and don't have a job. I don't believe that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, depending on which scenarios the studies choose, because they usually take two different scenarios, two extreme ones. But actually, there is a prognosis that we will have more jobs than we are having now. So it's not about that we lack jobs; it's more that we lack qualified personnel. And as you said, it's a lot about how do we deal with the machine or with the algorithm-based decision. And I think what is the biggest challenge is to qualify the people to critically reflect what the artificial intelligence offers me, and not to trust too much in the intelligence of the algorithm. You know what I mean? I think that is the hardest thing to say, no, I actually don't believe this algorithm. And to dare to say that and to have the qualification to recognize it, and maybe also making mistakes, of course. But
and all the data we use is biased.
Exactly.
In many dimensions, right? So using data that is nothing but a representation of the past to learn for the future is well.
Yeah.
We have to be aware of biases and not to prolong thoughts we made in the past.
Mm-hmm. Coming back to the education side, Thorsten, what would you advise maybe young people, but maybe also us?
Yeah, actually, yes. So I would advise everybody who can handle a smartphone or who can handle a computer to try it out. And we recently did with a class of pupils from the students, so grade of 10, so 10. Klasse. So we asked them to train an AI to recognize pictures, and it was a biology class. So the teacher chose the challenge to distinguish two types of glasses. So you may all remember from school there are those Erlenmeyer-Kolben, so this not straight-shaped glasses, but the ones they use in laboratories. So the idea was, okay, train the AI to distinguish regular glasses from Erlenmeyer-Kolben. And we told the teachers, okay, you need to take a lot of pictures with your smart cam. This is what everybody can do, taking pictures with smartphones. So what they did, they brought 100 pictures from type A and 100 pictures from type B. And then the stuff we actually expected happened. The group A put the pictures on a white surface, and the group B, they worked at the front desk of the teacher, where they have this red Backstein, so you know those bricks that are fireproof. So it happens what could only happen. The system learned that the glasses on white surface are type A, and that the glasses on red surface are type B. And this was a good learning experience, and it wasn't complicated. We did it in 2 hours. So actually what I would like to encourage you to do yourself, and encourage every of your childs, of your peers, get on the internet, try the technology for free on all the clouds, be it IBM Cloud, be it Amazon Web Services, be it Google, be it Microsoft Azure. They all have services you can use and try for yourself. get together maybe with some technical geeks who can help you with the first steps and try it out and see the limitations. I think this is important. We need to understand the limitations. It's all about the bias, and if we automate wrong decisions, we just make it worse.
Well, if we look at China, if we look at the US, it feels like Europe is a bit behind when it comes to AI. Is it a problem that we watch data security that much, Christian? Would it be easier
if we opened Pandora's box and just did... obviously, it's always easier to work without regulations. If there are no rules, it's easy, you can advance quickly, sure. But this is obviously not what we want, and I think it was quite clever what Senator Dr. Prosta just said in the opening speech. We have to find a third way between China and between the US to have quality products, but with an implemented privacy and data protection. So I don't think we should just, in order to advance and to put ourselves more on the front, to just disregard any regulations, but we have to, I think, speed up. I think we have not only lost some ground because of regulation, but also because of other reasons and because of German angst and people not doing something, but rather thinking before implementing things. And I think we should just be more active and positive about things, and this could change a lot.
Mm-hmm. So Henning, is there the danger of like a new Cold War, and how can we pretend it?
Yeah, that's what many people and colleagues of mine expect in the future, that a new Cold War could probably emerge due to HWWI issue and all the things we currently discuss. And my impression is that we indeed need a third European way to deal with data and artificial intelligence. And the interesting thing is that, well, a single observation is worth nothing, right? There's no economic value in a single observation. So we need a centralization of data on platforms to deploy data, the economic value of data. And that means we can decide between a state-owned platform and a privately owned platform. But that is in any case not a very good idea for consumers, right? So we have to protect consumers, because knowing people by data means that we can discriminate people, consumers, by charging different prices, for example. And that's why I think the European way should focus on building a new data infrastructure, and that could mean that we build on open data structures or infrastructures, right? So everybody can use data. It becomes a common resource that every single firm can use and use for
like
for
the trial in Barcelona, I think.
Right. So everybody has access to data and can use it to develop, to create new business models, and that could a way that is well. That would in turn mean that data is an open and common resource, and we are not prepared for allowing that, because we need to adjust regulation. And coming back to your statement, I think it's good. It's a good idea to solve and answer the ethical questions from the very end, but we should not forget to start, right, to create a forward-looking idea of AI and trying to implement this idea in thousands of different business models to show that there is an advantage, that this can increase the welfare of people, right? That could be a European approach to develop AI.
Mm-hmm. Thorsten, what would be your European approach?
Yeah, actually, I agree to that approach. We know that it it works to make something open. So we have open source. So if you take one of the most successful open source projects being Linux, most people don't know, but Linux is a base for your Apple computer, Linux is a base for Android, Linux is a base for iOS. In the core, it's Unix-like systems, it's open sourcing the code. And now that we agree that data is a source to train AI systems, we should open source, we should open the data. We should open the data, and we can distinguish the personal identifiable data from the non-personal identifiable data, and we can open that. And the city of Hamburg is doing this, other cities are doing that. So if you look on the internet, search for open data, it's a kind of a movement. It's a kind of a movement, and then we need to concentrate and focus on the stuff that needs to be protected. So for example, if we take traffic in Hamburg, and there was latest news that traffic is bad, yada, 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 we can do a lot of it. If we say, okay, this is traffic in general. If it's my wife or my daughter or my son or whatever, and they track him or her through the traffic, then we may want to protect that. So I think we should open as much as possible for the benefit to advance the technology, and then focus on the stuff we don't want to make open and really protect it. And the answer to that one is encryption. So if you put anything on the cloud that has value, if it's somewhere out there, it's like sending a postcard somewhere. You can't ensure you get it back unless you encrypt it. So this is the technology answer to that.
So thank you so much. And now I'm very curious for your questions. And yes, you are allowed to ask these questions in German if you like. So who has a question? Yeah. So maybe you can introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Axel Hackbart. I'm a scientist and interested in all this open data structure as well. The one thing that shivers me a bit is having all these high technology companies like Google or Alphabet and Baidu that have all the computing power. And if we as Europeans now say, oh, we just open all our data, don't you think that we might open up what defines us, the data, to other countries, that they could meddle with our infrastructure, with our elections, with everything we value, because they have much better computing and interpretation through the AI algorithms and computing power they have.
Thank you. Who wants to answer?
Yes, it's true, but there is no alternative. I think we need to open data and to push business models, because if there is open data, some people will think, oh, interesting, we've got this like landscape data, we've got this traffic data, we've got this, that, and the other, and they think about creating products around this, and this helps everybody. So I don't really think that there is an alternative to opening the data, even if it could be abused or if we just give it out to the US companies as well. I think we have very clever people here in Europe who can develop products around this. So this is our only choice. And we should do it now and very quickly. And we've seen in our practice that a lot of very clever business models have been created around data, especially also in the health business, really being a fast move forward, like precognition of strokes, precognition of cancer. This is, and I think we should tell these stories, because this is how AI makes the world better, and maybe people are less afraid if they know about how AI could do good in the world.
Yeah, I'd like to agree on that, especially on healthcare. There are open models already that enable researchers to train systems to detect breast cancer, to detect melanomas on the skin. More on that after lunch in the talk AI for healthcare. But I think this is a good point. We have no choice, and the point is the closed data in this data, Kraken, whatever it is, so Octopus for data, those big companies, they have more closed data than we have open data. So the tiny amount of data we can open doesn't make it worse. So I think there's only a lot of potential to make it better.
Roda, do we really don't have a choice? What do you think?
well, I of course always think that we've got a choice because that's my job, kind of, to show what choices you have. But I think that it's good to what you said, and I always just want to make you think about that. We should think before what are the possible outcomes, you know, and then we can decide better, and we can also try something and see, okay, what's an error, and then we do it next time better and we learn from it. But also to think of what is actually technological capable, also in future, because I think a lot of things based on assumptions, it's not really evidence-based sometimes when it's about future and what kind of technologies we will have in future, and also about the societal needs and what actually we as a society want and what our opinion is, and then connect those things, societal foresight and technological foresight, and then see what our future is and which one do we want actually as a society.
Henning, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, because I think that this very different approach requires a completely new regulatory framework, right? We don't have to.
I think your mic doesn't work. Maybe you take this from
okay.
Roda, yeah?
Thank you. So, how can we organize a free market economy? How can we organize competition, right, in a digital world? That is a question we are not really prepared for, because we can't even tax digital firms. We can't even tax digital value, right? So the entire regulatory framework must be changed in order to allow ideas you just mentioned, right? Open data, open source, infrastructures. That is completely new for us, but we need to focus on different approaches, and otherwise there will be no digitalization, right? Without deploying data. So we have to think about how to properly deploy data, keeping in mind privacy, consumer protection, and first of all, we have to find prerequisites and a new regulatory framework. That's important. And to add another point is that I think we should put this question on a global agenda, right? The G20 agenda, for example, because in the future there will be no single product or services traded across borders that does not transfer any data. So that is a global issue, for sure.
All right. Okay, cool. Do we have one more question? Yes.
For sure. Hey, my name is Max from HWWI. Now we talked about automation, we talked about substitution of jobs, about creation of new ones. One topic that usually goes along, so we got really miss out on this one this time as well, is universal basic income. I mean, maybe you heard about Andrew Yang, right? So he's traveling around US promoting his idea of universal basic income, and he's popular, right? A lot of people listen to him. He got a lot of clicks, and he's a tech entrepreneur. And really, this is his kind of argumentation. He says there are a lot of substitution of jobs, a lot of automation. Even though we might create new ones in the future, it's about the lower quarter maybe who are not that easily new trained. Now my question would be, in your perspective, in your point of view, is that feasible solution? Is that financially possible? Does it make sense? Would it work in Europe?
Thank you. I would ask you for a very short answer, please.
I don't support that idea of universal basic income because, labor and to work, to have a job is more than getting income, right? It's gaining it's income, but also meaning, and so I think it's a bad idea to leave people out of the labor market. We have to integrate all these people. We should not allow to just to pay such a transfer and leave them and say, well, that's it. Don't expect any further things from the government or the society. That's not a good idea, I think.
Okay, I see nods nodding on the panel. Yeah.
However, I think we should have a plan about how these people could be integrated into society so they will not be left behind. So I think we should think more about this. Roda talked about the substitution, and I think without a plan this would be a very bad idea.
Okay, Then, well, we have started our timer a bit too late, so this is why I have to come to an end now. So thank you so much for this very interesting discussion. Thank you so much for listening, for your participation. And if you are interested, we are going to have talks now by Thorsten and by Roda. So if you like to, you can come with us to the State Square. And otherwise, I wish you a great congress and a lot of fun at the next panel. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.